Councilmember McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember Che, and thank you, Director Anderson and your entire staff, all the work that you all have been doing, both in Ward 5 and across the District of Columbia. I do appreciate how hard you all have worked to bring quality rec centers and programming to our residents. I want to compliment you in particular on the work that's been done in the Edgewood Rec Center.
Thank you.
We've got a long history of trying to identify funding to replace funding that was reprogrammed some years ago before I was on the council, and to see how we're making progress with the planning and what that looks like. Those residents that I've spoken to about that are really excited about the rec center. So I want to thank you for that. The extended rec center hours is something that I brought up last year, both with the executive, with you, and the thought was trying to extend hours, obviously if possible across the city, like we did with the libraries, but in particular in parts of the city where we're seeing the highest incidence of violence. And I do appreciate, I brought this to Councilmember Che, I brought it to Chairman Mendelson, and they were supportive of the idea. We weren't able to fund it in last year's budget, but I'm glad to hear Councilmember Che mentioned it today and sounds to be supportive of it today. And so my thought is, in your response, I think you mentioned that if you do it one place, you have to find somewhere else in another ward to do it.
Yeah, I would like to, because we had, and there was a pilot program at the Guy Mason Center where we opened the recreation at Sunday hours.
Right.
But for me, if I'm opening up a recreation center in one ward, I'd like to have at least one open in all wards to address some of the concerns that you just made.
And I completely understand that, and I know that there are residents who be lined up to go into rec centers on Sundays.
And I'm hearing an overarching theme here with the Sunday hours. I think as our population continues to grow, we are a very active city. This is something that we are going to have to address.
Yeah, and you mentioned population. I want to put a pin in that because I'm going to come back to one area in particular where we're seeing the population grow. But in terms of prioritizing, if there is not money for some reason to extend hours to Sundays for all rec centers, in terms of prioritizing, I would urge you and the executive, as well as my colleagues, to look at those parts of the city where we're seeing the highest incidence of violence and give those youth and those people in those parts of the city the opportunity to have some meaningful engagement programming during Sunday hours and extended hours beyond 4 p.m. in some cases where rec centers close early. I know that and your staff was helpful in providing information about rec centers that do go beyond 4 p.m. on Saturdays,
right.
But I would like to see that be more consistent, and to the extent we're trying to identify ways to open them up on Sunday, I would just urge that the prioritization be those areas that probably need it most. You mentioned population increases. I think that's a very important point. One area where we're seeing the population increase with the steady building of homes is the Fort Lincoln area.
Yes.
So we've had Dakota Crossings built over the years. The villages at Dakota Crossing are now being built. We've got the Costco. We've got the Lowe's, Dick's Sporting Goods, the Marshalls, and all these great amenities in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the residents don't have as many amenities that they could really use given the population growth. They got a cultural center where seniors really try to engage in activities that we'd like to see more robust programming. We have a school, and I know this isn't you, similar to Councilmember Gray. It's in DGS's portfolio, but we have a closed Thurgood Marshall School with an auditorium, and I mean, we have resources there that are not being utilized right now. And in the case of the cultural center, we'd love to see that expanded and renovated so that it can really serve the residents of Fort Lincoln. That is one of my top priorities in terms of rec centers in Ward 5, and I know you're aware of it, and I know that I think there's a study that is either about to be conducted or is in the midst of being conducted. And so if you want to speak briefly to that.
Yes, we do recognize that the Fort Lincoln community has grown exponentially over the last 3 to 5 years. And historically, the Theodore Hagen's Recreation Center was a center that was primarily used for senior programming. So those are conversations that we are having internally in terms of now that we have essentially a brand new community with everything that's being built over there, how best we start serving that community. So that is on our radar screen. Those are conversations that we're having in terms of how we start to program not only what we have at the site now, but what it looks like in the future.
Okay, so great. And just if you could just continue to as you all have, loop our office in and the progress that's going on. Obviously, a really strong civic association in Fort Lincoln.
That's
and so we want to
correct.
make sure the president of the civic association is
That's
aware of
correct.
it, and also some of the tenant associations in the senior buildings. And then just a side note, I want to mention it. I know, again, it's not you, but I will be asking Chancellor Wilson about the status of Thurgood Marshall Elementary School, given the increase in the population, as to whether or not it's time to reopen that as a school for the residents and
Right.
the students and the young families in Fort Lincoln. Arboretum Rec Center is another rec center that obviously is a top priority for Ward 5 residents. They have about $7.2 million, I think, in the budget. Would that be enough to do the types of sort of meaningful renovations that the residents of Arboretum, ANC, Jacqueline Manning, who I know your office is familiar with, has been a strong advocate for the renovations there, as well as the community there in general. But what can we do with $7.2 million, or should we be looking to find additional funding to do a really meaningful renovation of the Arboretum Rec Center? I probably hesitate to call it a rec center. It's more probably appropriately called a field house,
That's
given
correct.
the small size of it.
That's correct. And I think with this, first of all, I think $7.2 million for the Arboretum field house is adequate. We'll be able to significantly expand the footprint of the recreation center, but I want to make sure that whatever we do, and we will engage the community and your office in terms of what the community would like to see. There's some very beautiful green space there, and so we want to be mindful of that green space and make sure that we preserve as much green space as possible. So I do think $7.2 million for that project is adequate funding to expand the footprint of the current field house. I'm not exactly sure how many additional square feet you would get, but you would get much more. But again, as you know, there's a beautiful green space behind that recreation center. We have a greenhouse there, as well as a very robust community garden program at that recreation center.
And then
there.
finally, I know there have been concerns with residents that they don't want to see the funds disappear. And so can you assure residents of Arboretum that there are no plans to reprogram any funding out of
There are
Arboretum?
no plans to reprogram those monies for the Arboretum Recreation Center.
And finally, with the last couple of minutes, New York Avenue, the rec center, it's like right on N Street across from Dunbar.
Right.
There's nobody there, I believe, right now, and there's no programming for that.
And that is
right?
something that we are looking to program soon. We've been engaging some community organizations in terms of partnering and bringing programs to that center. So I will keep you abreast of the findings or what we're going to do moving forward.
And the time frame would be great. The community has been really organized around that, and I'm sure Joyce Robinson Paul is going to be excited to hear that there are
Right.
plans to program that, and the residents who are in that Bates area, Hanover area, are going to be really excited about getting some programming going on at that rec
Yes,
center.
I know we've been looking at doing some robust programming around teens
Okay.
and seniors.
Perfect.
So that we are moving in that direction, and I'm confident we'll put something there that the community will be that will enjoy. But I would like to make sure that you know that there is a basketball camp there in the summer.
Okay.
So in the summertime, that recreation center is utilized. I cannot remember the organization. I think it's Metro Ball.
Yeah, it is Metro Ball.
That operates out of that recreation center in the summer.
Okay.
But to your point, we are looking to do something year-round there.
Okay, and then finally, this is something that came to my attention recently. They have some early childhood programs happening in some of the rec centers, I believe.
Co-op program, yes.
Co-op programs, yes. And is that in conjunction with another agency, or who?
A DPR operates that
Sure,
program.
operate those.
Yeah.
If you could get back to the committee, Chair, it would be great. One of the concerns that have been raised to me recently, I was actually having some breakfast, and a whole group of parents mentioned that they were part of a co-op, I think at Turkey Thicket. But they had concerns because their kids were aging out of the co-op, but they hadn't yet reached the age to enroll in a pre-K3 program. And I don't know if that's something that sounds familiar to you.
So the co-op program starts at 18 months and goes to 36 months.
Okay.
So I need to look into that a little further, which is the age that they should be going into.
Okay.
What is it, the pre-K program?
Right. Well, they explained that there were some co-ops that had no gap, so that kids could stay enrolled in all the way up to the time that they were enrolled in the pre-K through. But these parents in particular mentioned that there were kids who were aging out of the co-op program before they had reach the age to enroll in pre-K3.
Okay, I will look into that and get back to you with a response.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I don't have any additional questions, Chairman, and my time has expired, so perfect timing. Thank you.